The HOA thought they could control me with fines and rules, but they had no idea I owned the very lake they were fighting over. The morning began like any other, with the soft shimmer of sunlight spilling across the rippling lake water. Birds glided low over the surface. The breeze carried the faint scent of pine from the woods, and my boat rested peacefully by the dock, tied securely as it had been for years. For me, that boat wasn't just a vessel. It was freedom. It was peace. It was my reminder that life had rewards worth holding on to after decades of hard work. But for the HOA, it was suddenly a violation, a problem they claimed was disturbing the aesthetics of the community. What they thought was just a fight over a boat was about to expose the biggest secret this neighborhood had ever seen. The notice arrived tucked under my door, printed in bold, self-important letters. Remove the boat immediately or face fines. It wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. The HOA board, led by a handful of people who love control more than community, had decided my dock boat was a nuisance. According to them, it obstructed the view of the lake, disrupted uniformity, and sent the wrong message to neighbors. But behind their carefully chosen words was something else. Power. They thrived on it. I stood on my porch that afternoon, looking out across the water, wondering how far they would push me. The lake had always been the centerpiece of this neighborhood. Families gathered by it. Children skipped stones across it, and couples watched sunsets over it. For years, the HOA held events on the water's edge, treating the lake as if it were theirs to govern. But there was a truth, a detail they either didn't know or had conveniently forgotten, something that shifted all power away from them and into my hands. They ruled with threats, but I held the one thing they could never take, the deed to the lake itself. The story of the lake stretched back decades. Long before the HOA even existed, before the neighborhood expanded, the lake had been part of an old estate passed down through families. That estate, through a series of transactions, became mine. It wasn't common knowledge, because I never flaunted it. Why would I? To me, ownership wasn't about control. It was about stewardship. I maintained the water rights, the boundaries, the upkeep. I paid the taxes that no one else noticed. And every summer, when I watched kids fish from its banks, I smiled silently, knowing they enjoyed a gift I protected. But now, as the HOA flexed their rules, I realized the irony. They wanted me to move a boat from a lake they had no claim to. They wanted to dictate what I could and couldn't do on water that legally belonged to me. It was almost laughable, almost. The first confrontation came swiftly. They scheduled a meeting, sending me another letter laced with warnings of penalties and escalating fines. The board spoke of compliance, order, and fairness, words they wielded like weapons. To them, my boat wasn't just a boat. It was defiance. In their eyes, if they let me get away with it, others would follow, and their control would weaken. That's what it was always about, control. As I listened to their accusations, I remained calm. On the outside, I let them believe they were winning, let them pile their demands higher. On the inside, I prepared for the inevitable moment when I would pull the ground from beneath their feet, the moment when I would reveal the truth they had overlooked all these years. They thought they were closing in on me, but every step they took brought them closer to their own downfall. But the HOA didn't stop at letters and meetings. They began rallying neighbors. Whispers spread, "Why does he need a boat here? Why won't he just move it?" Some neighbors sided with me, others with the HOA. A quiet division crept into the community, all over one boat, all over one assumption, that the lake was common ground. The pressure grew. HOA members walked past my house more often, clipboards in hand, pretending to inspect other areas while glaring at my dock. They issued new notices, each one harsher than the last. They threatened lawsuits, liens, even removal of my dock itself. But through it all, I held a calm resolve. They didn't realize they were building toward their own downfall. They believed they had cornered me. But hidden in my safe was a secret that would destroy their entire argument. Because hidden in my files, tucked away in a fireproof safe, were the documents no one expected me to have. Deeds, titles, surveys, all proof that every ripple of water, every inch of shoreline, legally belonged to me. And as the weeks wore on and the HOA's arrogance swelled, I knew the time was near. They thought they had cornered me, but they were about to discover the truth in the most public, most humiliating way possible. The HOA thought their final notice would break me, but it only set the stage for their greatest humiliation. The letter arrived on a rainy afternoon, stamped with urgency and dripping with arrogance. It was their strongest weapon yet, an ultimatum. The HOA demanded I remove my boat within 7 days or face immediate legal action, fines that multiplied daily, and the possibility of them forcibly removing my dock. To them, it was a final blow. To me, it was the last push I needed to reveal the truth. Neighbors whispered louder now. Some avoided eye contact when they passed my driveway, unwilling to take sides. Others offered half smiles of encouragement, silently rooting for me. But the board members, emboldened by their own echo chamber, walked the streets with confidence, as if victory was already theirs. They didn't know they were marching straight into the trap they had built for themselves. They believed they controlled the lake, but they didn't even own the water beneath their feet. The HOA called for a community-wide meeting. It was their moment of power, a chance to stand before the neighborhood and make an example of me. Flyers were placed in mailboxes. The agenda was clear. One item, one goal: remove the boat. To them, it was a display of authority. To me, it was the perfect stage. The day arrived, and the meeting hall filled with folding chairs and the restless buzz of voices. Families with children, retirees sipping coffee, young couples eager to see justice unfold, all gathered under one roof. At the front stood the HOA board, clipboard stacked, smug smiles plastered on their faces. They believed this was the day I would bend, but I had other plans. As the meeting began, the board recited rules and bylaws, their voices dripping with confidence. They painted my boat as a menace, a disruption to community standards. They declared that allowing it to remain would open the floodgates for chaos. The crowd murmured, some nodding, some frowning. And just when the HOA thought they had swayed the majority, I stepped forward with a quiet resolve. They thought they were stripping me of power, but I was about to strip away their entire argument. I carried with me a folder, worn on the edges, but holding the kind of weight paper rarely carries. Inside were deeds older than anyone in that room, survey maps drawn by hands long gone, and tax records signed by county officials. It was more than evidence. It was truth carved into history. When I opened that folder, I felt the silence spread across the room like a wave. Eyes followed my hands. The board smirks faltered and the tension grew thick. I laid out the documents piece by piece, each page a nail in the coffin of their authority. The deeds confirmed ownership. The surveys marked boundaries. The tax records proved stewardship. And then came the line that silenced even the most vocal critics. The lake, from its rippling surface to its muddy bottom, belongs solely to me. In one breath, I turned their lake meetings, their lake rules, their lake parties into trespassing on my property. Gasps filled the room. Some neighbors leaned back in shock. Others leaned forward with curiosity. The board, one so confident, now fumbled with papers, trying to find loopholes where none existed. For years, they had paraded around the lake, enforcing rules, holding events, even charging fees for access, never realizing they had been standing on someone else's property the entire time. The power shift was immediate. Every eye that once judged me now turned to the HOA, questioning, doubting, demanding answers. The same families who once whispered about my boat problem now whispered about the board's ignorance. But the HOA wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. They tried to spin the narrative, insisting that even if I owned the lake, I still had to comply with community harmony. They clung to control like a rope slipping through their fingers. But the more they argued, the weaker they sounded. They wanted to break me with fines, but now they were the ones standing on dangerous ground. Because if I chose, I could ban their use of the lake altogether. No more swimming, no more fishing, no more HOA parties by the water. Their threats of fines meant nothing compared to the rights I held in my hands. And for the first time, they knew it. The meeting ended in chaos. Neighbors demanded clarity. Some sided with me openly now, praising my patience. thanking me for keeping the lake open all these years. Others accused the HOA of lying, of pretending to own what was never theirs. The board left the room in silence, their confidence shattered. But I knew this wasn't over. The HOA was wounded, humiliated, but not finished. And wounded animals are often the most dangerous. They thought the lake's secret was my final card. But I had more power waiting to be revealed, and the next move would change everything. The HOA thought they could recover after I exposed the truth, but their next move would destroy them completely. In the days following the community meeting, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. The board had been humiliated, their authority cracked wide open, and yet, instead of stepping back, they doubled down. Pride blinded them. They refused to accept that the lake they had ruled for years was never theirs to begin with. Behind closed doors, they drafted new threats. Word spread of secret meetings, of lawyers consulted, of desperate plans to claw back their authority. They told neighbors that my ownership of the lake didn't matter, that community standards still gave them the final say. But no matter how many words they twisted, the truth remained. The water was mine. The shoreline was mine, and the power they pretended to have was gone. They tried to strip me of rights I already owned, but their fight only tightened the noose around their own necks. The HOA delivered one last letter, this time claiming they would sue me personally, dragging me into court to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. Their tone dripped with arrogance, but I could sense the desperation between the lines. They needed a victory, any victory, to save face. What they didn't expect was that I was already 10 steps ahead. With my attorneys, I filed a countersuit, not only challenging their threats, but demanding repayment for years of unauthorized use of the lake. Every party they hosted by the water, every fee they charged neighbors for lake access, every event they staged on my property, they all added up to a mountain of damages. They wanted me to pay fines, but instead, I made them pay for every drop of water they'd ever touched. The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors who once saw the HOA as untouchable now realized they had overstepped for years. Families who quietly resented the board stepped forward, sharing stories of overreach, intimidation, and unfair fines. The lawsuit opened a floodgate the HOA could never close. The courtroom showdown was the final nail. As the judge reviewed my documents, the truth was undeniable. The HOA had no authority over the lake. Worse, they had exploited it, acting as though they were landlords of something they never owned. The ruling was swift. The HOA was ordered to cease all control over the lake immediately, to repay damages, and to issue a public apology. In one stroke of a gavel, their empire collapsed, and the lake was mine, free and untouchable. The fallout was brutal. The board members who once strutted with power now shrank in shame. Their fines, their threats, their arrogance, all exposed as hollow. The neighbors who once doubted me now saw the truth. The HOA wasn't protecting the community. They were protecting their control. And now, that control was gone forever. The lake sparkled brighter after that. My boat remained tied at the dock, untouched, untouchable. Children played at the shoreline again, this time without fear of HOA rules. Neighbors greeted me with respect, some with gratitude. And the board? They retreated into silence, their voices no longer carrying the weight they once held. They wanted to take away my boat, but instead, they lost everything they thought they owned. The war was over. The HOA had underestimated me, underestimated the law, and most of all, underestimated the power of truth. They thought I was just one homeowner against a board, but they forgot that when you own the lake, you control the tide. And that's how the HOA tried to strip me of my boat, only to discover I owned the entire lake beneath their feet. What do you think? Was I too patient with them, or should I have revealed the truth sooner? Drop your thought in the comments, and if you love seeing HOA bullies get exactly what they deserve, make sure to hit that like button, share the story, and subscribe for more shocking HOA dramas you won't believe.